Remember and respond to what God has done for you. Find out why that is essential in this episode of 5 Minutes Closer. I'm Vaughn Weatherford, and this is 5 Minutes Closer. For the next 5 minutes, let's explore some biblical truths and apply them to your life. No podcast, including this one, can transform your life or give you what you really need. Only Jesus can do that. You can find out why in what I've called the first five episodes of 5 Minutes Closer. Each following episode explores scriptural truths that, if you follow them, will bring you 5 minutes closer to the person God created you to be. Let's see if we can get you 5 minutes closer. Reminders are big business, from sticky notes to smartphone apps and planners synced to your desktop and tablet. Customers spend millions of dollars each year to ensure they remember to pick up a loaf of bread on the way home. Jacob knew he would need a reminder. He had a tendency to forget some very important ways God was helping him. At the conclusion of one of the foundational events in his life, he places a reminder for himself and for others of God's faithfulness. Described in Genesis chapter 28, verses 20 through 22. There the Bible says, "Then Jacob made a vow, saying, 'If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I may come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you.'" Jacob was not exactly an exemplary human being at this point in his life. Among other things, he had cheated his brother twice, lied to his father on his deathbed. He wasn't exactly a candidate for Family Member of the Year. He was currently fleeing for his life, afraid his brother would do him harm and knowing that he probably deserved it. But God had not abandoned Jacob. Amid all of his failures, God was still faithful to Jacob. And Jacob understood the significance. God had blessed him when he deserved nothing. God's blessings called for a response. Jacob responded simply and profoundly, first by saying, "The Lord will be my God." Jacob realized that if God did all of that for him, the only response that made sense was to follow him as God. Jacob responds to God's faithfulness with a commitment to be faithful to God. He wouldn't be perfect in this. He would falter along the way to come. But from this point on in his life, Jacob's focus changes. From a self-serving life centered on getting what he could, no matter what the cost to anyone around him, Jacob now seeks to serve God and focus on his covenant promise. What changed? Jacob realized God's grace and love. Have you made mistakes in your life? God has not abandoned you. God shows his grace and forgiveness for our failings. When you understand God's love for you, the only thing that makes sense is to respond. Jacob took the stone he had used for a pillow and set it up as a monument to remind him that God was with him. Every time he or someone else passed by that stone, they would be reminded of God's presence and grace. And Jacob never wanted to forget what God had done for him. But Jacob knew he would not always be on that road where he had set up the stone. It would be many years before he would travel back to his family. Until then, Jacob built another monument, something he would see frequently in his life. Every time God blessed him materially, Jacob vowed to give 10% back to God as a tithe. We don't often think of our tithes and offerings in that way. We think of them as something the church needs to keep the lights on, that our gift would be a nice way to take care of the needs of others or to support the work of missionaries, and all of that's true. But none of that's why we give. It wasn't for Jacob. Every time he had an income, he gave a tenth of it back to God. Why? He wanted to remind himself that God had given everything he had. His giving back would be a constant reminder, a monument along the way of life to remind him of the grace and presence of God. How will you remember what God has done for you? Don't forget, because now you're 5 minutes closer. My prayer is that these 5 minutes have challenged you, inspired you, and caused you to consider applying God's message for your life from His Word. To find out more, visit our website at 5minutescloser.com. Join me next time to see if we can get you 5 minutes closer.